Sometimes a name surfaces in real trade conversations that simply shouldn't be there at all. A genuine all-star squarely in his prime on a team that isn't even fully rebuilt yet. Tonight on the show, I have to tell you about exactly that kind of situation because Lauri Markkanen's name has genuinely come up in real, credible national trade analysis, and one team that makes real sense as a suitor is the Los Angeles Lakers. So stay with me, Lakers fans, because adding this kind of all-star stretch big next to Luka Donic is exactly the kind of move that completes a real championship roster. Here's exactly what's being reported right now, cutting right through all the noise. According to CBS Sports' own national trade candidate rankings, Markkanen has been specifically directly flagged as one of the league's single most significant trade candidates, with analysts pointing directly to Utah's own front office philosophy as the exact reason why. Danny Ainge has a genuinely well-documented history of moving proven, valuable players whenever the timeline and asset value makes sense to him, entirely regardless of team success or personal sentiment. Lauri Markkanen. In the purple and gold next to Luka Donic. Read that line again, slowly, because if you truly understand just how rare a true all-star stretch big like this really is, and you understand exactly what Luka Donic genuinely needs around him for the long haul, you understand precisely why this could be one of the most significant moves of the entire offseason. And I am here to walk you through step by step exactly why a player this good might genuinely be available, because it's a genuinely fascinating situation developing in real time. Now, I already know exactly what some of you are going to bring up right away, the real draft capital cost after the Lakers' other recent moves this summer, and we are going to get to every single bit of it, I promise, because I always give you the honest version. But stay with me through this one, because pairing a true, genuine all-star stretch big with Luka Donic squarely in his prime is exactly the kind of move that builds a real, lasting championship core. Here's exactly what national analysts have said, and I want you to really understand the reasoning, because it's not speculation, it's roster math. CBS Sports put it plainly in their offseason trade candidates rankings. It would be, quote, downright cruel of Utah to hold Markkanen through a 4-year rebuild only to trade him right when the light starts to shine at the end of the tunnel. But Danny Ainge is, quote, utterly devoid of sentiment. Read that again. A national analyst is telling you directly that the Jazz's own front office has a track record of moving proven stars purely for asset value, regardless of sentiment or team success. Let me walk you through the actual roster situation because it's genuinely compelling. The Jazz are about to get significantly more expensive with new contract situations looming for both Walker Kessler and Keontae George. Utah also has Jaren Jackson Jr. now at forward after the blockbuster trade that brought him in from Memphis, along with rising young talent like Ace Bailey. That's a real logjam of front court and wing talent developing, exactly the kind of situation where a front office known for aggressive asset management starts looking at its most valuable trade chip. And let me underline just how real this new era of player movement has become, because it's the whole foundation here. Think about what we've already witnessed this offseason. A 2-time MVP was traded in one of the biggest blockbusters in recent NBA history. A former finals MVP changed teams entirely. Across this league, players everyone assumed were foundational, untouchable pieces have changed addresses one after another. Danny Ainge specifically has never been sentimental about moving proven talent when the asset value and timeline make sense. And that track record is exactly why national analysts keep floating Markkanen's name. Let me also address why a name this good is even worth discussing before real training camp battles begin, because timing genuinely matters in these situations. Front offices rarely make major moves in the dead of summer without real pressure building, and pressure in Utah's case comes specifically from the impending expense of new deals for both Kessler and George stacking on top of an already crowded front court. That's exactly the kind of financial squeeze that forces even a patient front office to start making real calls before the season actually begins. Let me remind you exactly who Lauri Markkanen is, because this is a real decorated all-star, not a speculative flyer. He's a genuine NBA all-star who has completely reinvented his career, transforming from a role player into one of the most efficient, versatile scoring bigs in the entire league. He's a legitimate, genuine 7-footer who shoots at an elite percentage from 3-point range, the exact kind of matchup nightmare that stretches an opposing defense to its absolute breaking point. He can score in isolation, off movement, in transition, from literally anywhere on the entire floor, the kind of genuine offensive weapon that doesn't even need a system built specifically around him to be devastating. He's still only 28 years old, squarely sitting in the prime years of his career, not some declining veteran, simply hoping for one last big contract. And here's exactly what makes this whole situation so genuinely fascinating. Lauri Markkanen represents exactly the kind of proven all-star level offensive talent that almost never becomes genuinely available in a real rebuild, because most rebuilding teams keep their single best player as the foundation piece, not as trade bait. But Utah's own situation right now is genuinely different from most rebuilds, and that's exactly why his name keeps surfacing in real trade conversations around this entire league. Let me also touch on Markkanen's own career arc, because it's genuinely relevant to why he'd thrive somewhere new. He was once viewed around the league as a disappointment relative to his draft position, a talented but inconsistent big man who bounced between teams before finally putting it all together in Utah. That journey from written-off role player to legitimate all-star speaks to a level of work ethic and adaptability that would translate seamlessly into a new system built around a different kind of star. So now let's talk about why this fits Luka Donic so perfectly, because this is the heart of it. But first, let me make sure you appreciate exactly how rare a player like this is, because it's the whole point of the story. In today's NBA, the hardest thing in the world to find is a true 7-foot stretch big who can shoot at an elite percentage, score in isolation, and still hold his own defensively, all while still in his physical prime. Most teams have a stretch big or a scoring big, rarely both in the same 7-footer. Markkanen has proven over multiple seasons now that he's exactly that rare combination. Think about how few all-star caliber players this age and this productive genuinely become available in a trade. That's exactly why his name keeps surfacing among the most significant trade candidates of the entire offseason. Here's the thing about building around Luka Donic. He is one of the greatest offensive engines the entire game has ever seen, and the single best way to maximize him is by surrounding him with real shooting gravity that genuinely punishes defenses for ever helping off him. Lauri Markkanen is exactly that kind of shooter, a genuine 7-foot stretch big who can space the floor from the 5 spot while still scoring at an elite level himself when the ball comes his way. Just imagine Luka orchestrating the offense from the perimeter while Markkanen relocates along the 3-point line or attacks a slow-footed closeout, forcing defenses into an impossible choice between the two of them. That combination, a generational offensive engine paired with one of the purest shooting bigs in the entire league, is exactly the kind of pairing that turns a good offense into an unstoppable one. So now let's talk about how this would actually work in practice, because the price is the key. A trade for Markkanen would require real, significant draft capital, likely multiple first-round picks given his all-star caliber. It would be a genuinely major, complicated, franchise-altering trade to construct, no question about it, especially after the Lakers' other recent moves earlier this summer. But the Lakers have always been a franchise genuinely willing to make the bold, blockbuster move when a player of this caliber is sitting right there on the table, and pairing a true all-star stretch big with Luka Donic in his prime is exactly the kind of swing this franchise exists to make. And let me put the stakes in proper context, because it matters here. Luka Donic is one of the greatest offensive talents this league has ever seen, but a generational engine like that only reaches its true ceiling with the right shooting infrastructure around it. Markkanen is not a hypothetical fit. He's a proven, verified elite shooter who has already shown he can space the floor at an elite percentage on real volume. That's not speculation, that's a well-documented, specific skill set that plugs directly into exactly what a team built around a ball-dominant offensive genius actually needs. Let me also address the timing question directly, because it's genuinely relevant here. Danny Ainge's Utah teams have consistently shown a willingness to make big, value-driven trades once a roster reaches a certain inflection point, and adding Jaren Jackson Jr. this past season, on top of Kessler and George both approaching expensive new contracts, is exactly the kind of roster crowding that has historically preceded a major move in Ainge's front offices. That's not speculation about his general reputation. That's a pattern that has repeated itself across multiple rebuilds he's overseen. But I told you I'd be honest with you, so let's take the doubts head on, because on this one they are real. The first objection is the cost. To land a player this good, the Lakers would have to give up real draft capital, especially after everything else they've already spent this summer building around Luka. That's a fair, real concern, but for a generational talent like Luka in his prime, you have to be willing to push your chips in to build a championship core, and a genuine all-star stretch big is exactly the kind of player worth pushing in for. The second objection is the fit, since Markkanen's defense has never been his calling card, and the Lakers already have real defensive concerns of their own. Fair question, but a team built around a ball-dominant offensive genius needs shooting gravity more than it needs another defensive stopper, and Markkanen's shooting alone changes how a defense has to play against Luka. The third objection is whether Utah would even prioritize moving him given how well their front court is developing together right now. Fair, but a front office with Danny Ainge's documented history rarely lets short-term chemistry override long-term asset value, and a crowded front court is exactly the kind of situation that produces real trades. Let me also touch on what a player with Markkanen's specific journey would bring to a Lakers locker room in transition. He was once viewed around the league as a disappointment relative to his draft position before finally putting it all together in Utah and becoming a genuine all-star. That journey from written-off role player to legitimate all-star speaks to a level of work ethic and adaptability that would translate seamlessly into a new-look roster still finding its identity around Luka Donic and Austin Reeves. Let me also address the money mechanics directly, because it's fair to ask how a team that just spent heavily this summer still finds room for another real addition. The truth is, whatever assets go out in a Markkanen trade would be concentrated primarily in draft picks rather than outgoing salary, which is a genuinely cleaner mechanism than a player-heavy trade that requires matching contracts. That's not a small detail, that's exactly the kind of financial structure that makes a real move still possible, even after a busy offseason of other additions. So let me tell you where my head is at, and then I've got one final thought that I think is the real key to all of this. If the Lakers pull this off, they give Luka Donic exactly the kind of shooting gravity his game has always thrived with, and they do it by adding a genuine all-star still in his prime. Just picture it, Luka running the offense, Markkanen spacing the floor and scoring from every level, a Lakers team suddenly impossible to load up against in a single direction. Whether it works comes down to the cost and the fit, and that's the real debate. But the fit with Luka is fascinating. The ceiling is a genuine championship, and the Lakers have never been shy about chasing exactly this kind of bold, star pairing swing. And here's the thought I want to leave you with, the part almost nobody is connecting. A genuine real all-star squarely in his own prime becoming available on the trade market is one of the single rarest opportunities in all of basketball. National analysts have already publicly connected the dots on Utah's own front office philosophy and track record. The Lakers, with a genuine superstar in Luka Donic who needs exactly this kind of shooting complement, are exactly the kind of team that should be exploring this every single day. And let me put this in the context of what this front office is actually chasing right now, because it raises the stakes. The Lakers just spent an entire summer methodically retooling around Luka Donic, and every single addition since has been evaluated through that exact lens. A true all-star stretch big becoming available at exactly the moment this front office is actively looking for ways to complete its roster is precisely the kind of opportunity that doesn't come around twice in an offseason. So let me boil it all the way down for you, because I want this crystal clear. A truly generational offensive engine in Luka Donic who genuinely needs a real shooting complement to fully reach his ceiling. A true, genuine all-star in Lauri Markkanen, squarely in his prime, sitting on a rebuilding Jazz roster with a front office that has genuinely never once been sentimental about moving proven value. The honest obstacle is the cost in draft capital, especially after the Lakers' other recent moves. But the fit with Luka is fascinating, the long-term ceiling is enormous, and the Lakers, of all franchises, exist to make exactly this kind of bold, star-pairing swing.